Welcome everybody to the evolution of AI and gaming panel. I'm Tom Shaughnessy. I'm one of the co-founders of Delphi Digital. We're a research firm and a venture firm, and we have a labs division, the whole kind of 9 yards there. Today I'm joined by Aaron McDonald of Altered State Machine, of Non-Fungible Labs, and a bunch of plays that I think everybody knows. If you don't have a fluff or a party bear, not going to make it. And Brooks Brown, who continually blows my mind on the wrong way that I'm thinking about gaming and crypto and how the space should be moving in the right direction. So really excited to get started here. Aaron, let's start with you. Why don't you give a brief background and then we'll head over to Brooks.
Yeah, so Aaron McDonald here. I've been a technologist for 20 something years now. Started engineering, but kind of made my way through to the executive space in telco and IT, and then into startup world. I've been in crypto since around 2015, full-time since 2016. And my day job, I run two venture firms as a GP, but in my spare time, I co-found Web3 startups. And so one of the exciting ones most recently that Tom mentioned before was the Altered State Machine, which is a way to bring artificial intelligence to the masses through NFTs.
Love that. Brooks, what about yourself?
Well, most recently, I'm the founder of a company called Consortium 9. We're building a project called NOR, which is, as Tom mentioned, and very flatteringly, is trying to change the face of gaming, but very much crypto gaming and how gaming is integrated with crypto chains, NFTs, how we do all those things. It's a whole discussion. But my background comes from kind of finding ways to marry technology interestingly with story worlds and interaction. I cut my teeth a long time ago in marketing. Then developed my own game teams, won a Webby for best online game, and ultimately with VR specifically, which was kind of a dream project to work on. I won Tribeca and Sundance and a Lumiere for a VR piece I directed called Hero. I'm super jazzed about this because Aaron and Tom, both of you are people who I greatly respect in the space and who I've had many offline bullshitting fun conversations with, but a lot of really good online ones too. So I can't wait.
Hey, I mean, both are fun. I prefer the in-person ones, Brooks, but it just hasn't happened yet, man.
It's very rare I get to have like today I went off about how riddles work with you on Twitter. Like it's not we're a weird group, so I'm excited to see.
There's more doors than windows, man. I am so team.
Bro,
sorry, doors versus wheels.
I'm team doors, 100%.
Oh man, I'm wheels. Sorry, boys.
Dude, I mean, where are these wheels coming from?
Bro, desk chairs. There was everything. I'm sitting on 6 wheels at the bottom of this chair. I only got 2 windows in here. Or sorry, 1 door in here. Come on. There's no way. Well, guys, let's get into it. So AI in gaming is extremely buzzwordy, right? Like what the hell does that even mean? Like what exactly is an AI's role in gaming, and why is this time different? The stuff nobody wants to say.
Well, I think the way that the Altered State Machine's been looking at it is that the opportunity now exists for us to introduce personal ownership and training of AI in a gaming context. And that leaves the door open for us to change the way that AI interacts in a game. Previously, I think one of the issues was that you had this kind of small group of people determining the outcomes, and generally in a way that meant that AIs were this kind of universal force, singular universal force in a game context, as opposed to being unique individual characters in a game. And that notion of having an all-powerful AI that was doing something that was kind of collecting data from everyone and being able to kind of play better than you, or even like the notion of botting, which has been kind of seen as a negative thing for a long time in the game world, where it causes an unfair advantage. Now that we can kind of flip that a little bit and not only create unique individual AIs that are uniquely trained by individual people, the problems that existed with this kind of superpower in the game start to go away, and you democratize access to it So it becomes fair. It's not some unfair advantage. So now we can introduce mechanics that allow for intelligence to evolve inside a game and interact with other intelligence that evolve in a much more organic way than we had before.
Yeah, I would just to echo that, and kind of like where we started with the riddle, which are there more doors or wheels? It comes down to definitions, and that's the argument people end up getting into. And with AI, I think we end up with the same problem. People have been talking about AI in games for a very long time, and primarily what that really means is scripting. It's if this, then that scripts that are written in a specific way, designed in a specific way. Again, not denigrating the work done, because there's some extraordinary bits there. But when we start talking about what modern AI, machine learning, emergent AI is even capable of, and how we can play with those things, it changes a lot of what we use AI for in a game. You don't want necessarily a single player game. I go back to my favorite enemy AI in Fear, which granted that game's now like 700 years old. So it kind of shows how far or how little far we've come in time. But you design AI with a specific reaction in mind in order to continue a story or a world that's particular to that vein. When I move, I want to do a thing, or I want a player to feel a certain way. That's what level designers do, and that's what AI designers do primarily in games, is they try to make it fit. It doesn't make sense if the big hefty guy, because it may be the smartest thing, runs the other way because he knows Master Chief is coming. You need someone to go into it like a big dumb brute. So it's AI is one of those things that definition wise, I think we're starting to see, well, maybe not that, but what can we do when it comes to actually real emergent little creatures running around our spaces? What does that even look like? How do we even handle that or think about that? And from a game's perspective and design, it's kind of incredible. It's a different place than traditional AI, as they say inside of games, though, for sure. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and I think also AI technology has progressed as well. And so the kind of types of things you can do now are much more sophisticated, and we're not out of uncanny valley territory yet, but we're kind of getting close to that.
Yeah, we're starting to figure out exactly what those limits really are, and playing in a much more interesting spot for sure.
What exactly does this feel like, though? Like, I'm a young gamer 10 years ago, I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, I'm stealing a car, I'm running away from the cops, and there's, computer players everywhere. If your guys' vision makes sense and works, what is the difference for when I pop on my TV, I load up GTA, 7, and your views are fully in there? What is the experience like?
Well, so I would.
Oh, you go.
Yeah, so I would say I think like a game like GTA, I don't even know necessarily if you'd want all of them to have these kinds of AIs. It's a lot of that would be the same. Instead, think about it as Pokemon. What if Pokemon, you had creatures that actually had a responsive AI that you had to build a relationship, that did things in battle, whether or not they listened to you, as if they were a cogent agent-based entity themselves. The average pedestrian in GTA doesn't need any more processing power than they currently have. Sure, there's fun. Maybe we can have fun emergent worlds with really complex, but yeah, we're ways away from that. But the idea of a single creature that I can play with, or maybe a GTA game where you have a singular enemy instead of a multiplayer game, it's AIs that are built and designed and thought through and trained to find you and kill you. These kinds of things become really interesting on a singular sort of one-by-one basis instead of en masse. And that's, I think, to the point, what Altered State is really aiming at is thinking about singular AIs rather than here's the brunt of a million people coming at you. Instead, it's the thing.
Yeah, and
sorry
I think,
to speak for you. It's just
I was going to say exactly the same thing. It's really important to pick your moments, and just like in crypto in general, you want to use blockchains and DLTs for very specific things. When you start applying them to solving general technology problems, you get into lots of issues and make lots of mistakes. So you want to pick when to use an agent and in what format. And you think of like all of the deterministic games out there where you hit a button and some kind of wheel spins and something happens. Those are really great candidates for this, because now we can take that same activity and gameplay style and supercharge it and give the chance at what I'd like to call as more genuine randomness with these agents who are somewhat sentient interacting with each other and learning off those processes each time, as opposed to just the outcome of a spin of a dice. So that kind of game format is a really good one for it. I think you can see, a path to where you can introduce agents in the context of different game formats. But if you think about it from the point of view of how would I do this? How would I build a game to consume AI, as opposed to how do I take a game and put AI in it? I think that's the next most important thing, is think of the context of the game as if you started out with this and then imagined how it how a game could evolve from that, as opposed to slopping it into a format that already exists. But then even in existing formats, take something like a first player game that has team mechanics. Putting say me and 4 mates fighting a boss versus me and 4 agents that have trained with me and learned my style and follow me around the world and help me as a companion in that task. I think that those kinds of things can start to happen in existing formats too.
Yeah,
but,
and I would
but
even
in a
add,
fair way. You probably remember, if you played World of Warcraft, some dude with 4 shamans running around like nuking everything. Like, people hate that because it wasn't available to everybody and it wasn't built into the game mechanics. But if it was democratized and everyone had access to do that, and then you're on a level playing field, and then it's a matter of your configuration choices and team choices and training choices, then it becomes a skilled game again.
Yeah, and I would even add that it's thinking about it in real time is one thing, and I think it's, to Aaron's points generally on that, I think are spot on. But even the ability for us to utilize these agents or these AIs to do world generation. 2 of my favorite games ever, we'll just go with maybe even one of them, Dwarf Fortress, hands down one of the more extraordinary games that's ever been made. Literally has an entire period where the world is built for you by scripted events that happen inside of it. And it's incredibly complex. But the ability for us to actually have AIs that live inside of a space. And let's say we just fast forward time 1,000 years, what happens to the space? What do people have? Where do the gangs end up? So think about Grand Theft Auto, where you just basically leave people running in a simulation for 1,000 years. Where do the gang lines shift? Who's in charge of what? How do any of these things move? And then jumping into that emergent world and playing inside of a space in real time with other real people. There's a lot of ways to sort of cut when it comes to the proper use of AI inside of these spaces for really odd side sort of directions of things.
Yeah, and I don't want to throw away the car racing format too, because we are bringing out the Atom Car Club, which is an AI and ASM powered car racing game where the drivers are AIs. So that is something that you can do. I think that will be fun for people as an evolved version of Z Run, where the agents who drive these cars can learn. You can kind of create genealogical trees of drivers that have traits of some and traits of others. You can put them into a real race where they actually race each other in a track, rather than just kind of that dice spin scenario. So that those formats can be used. You can interject those things if you think about it right from the start.
Are you guys scared of, so you have everyone in this crowd in the future can own these non-playable characters, these AIs, these NFTs. We won't get into the specifics because it's beyond the scope of this conversation, but are you guys at all afraid that you have AIs in games or ecosystems that have a lot of financial economies built around them, and now you have AIs that could potentially run amok, right? Like in the real world, Elon Musk is totally afraid of AIs. Like, we're all kind of scared of that where the robots take over, but it's very hard to see what's actually going on when it's all code. Like, where does this run afoul? Are you guys afraid of that? Are there safeguards? What's the thought process there?
I mean, I feel like the world Elon's afraid of is inevitable. So like trying to run away from it is kind of silly. I mean, whether we'll see that in our lifetime or not, I don't know, but it is inevitable. Our mission right now with the altered state machine is to give more everyday people exposure to how artificial intelligence works, how you can interact with it, and learn enough so that they can help make intelligent decisions that shape the way this stuff evolves. Because right now it's over there. It sits in a dimension that the everyday person can't interact with and get their hands around. Some corporation is doing something in the background process of a digital interaction that I have, and I'm not a part of that process. So ASM is at its core a way to democratize the access to and understanding of and ownership of AI back into community hands and individuals' hands, as opposed to some amorphous being in the sky. And gaming is a tool or a weapon, depending on if you see this as a fight or not, that allows us to teach people in a really fun and engaging way the steps of how to interact with artificial intelligence, what it can do, how it reacts to you, how you can own it, and then how can you apply it to different kinds of tasks. Gaming being the first of those tasks, and then eventually other more sophisticated tasks, going up to creating, utility intelligence that works personally for us, our digital twins. And that entry point of gaming is a nice way to breadcrumb people up to that point. So hopefully in this, future context, we have a much more educated population that understands how these things work at a deeper level than they do now, and the potential for communities to own the outcomes of these machines, as opposed to just something that sits over there in the cloud and you don't have any control of.
Well, if you want to get in, for me, if you want to get the philosophical side of things, I don't necessarily believe AIs are capable of doing things that I would call new. The creative process, they're good at the combinative process, figuring out how things go together. I've never seen an AI create something new. New is an interesting thing. It's basically, as we may play a game like Dota and we can be defeated by a 5-man team of AIs inside of Dota, the ability for us to understand metas, very specifically in video games or in the real world, is a thing you then need to build an AI to specifically dedicate towards that. Any AI doesn't have the ability to sort of understand the meta and the singular, at least as they exist now. There's a lot of complications around that. So I have a lot less worry about AIs as we currently define them. It's my old joke is people say, oh, what if they start thinking like people? It's like, yeah, why don't you tell me how people work? And then we can figure it out, because like we don't even know how does thinking work as a thing is literally like the biggest question in philosophy, and technology is not anywhere near it. We're doing AI, keep doing AI. It's combinative and utilizes the information that exists. It's not emergent yet.
If we're being super philosophical, we're all AIs. So like it's happened already in some future.
I'm scared to smoke weed with Brooks because he's going to ask me these questions and I'm going to start losing it. What is life? Who are we? What's AI?
What is thinking?
Yeah. I'm only talking to Brooks before 9 p.m.
It's fair. It's fair. I'm not a fun person to smoke pot with. That's for it ends up becoming sort of like a weird Jesus moment, because I don't shut up. You think I don't shut up now? Christ, imagine me stoned. It's no fun.
No, I love
I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm gonna do it one day, Brooks.
Oh, it's worth it.
Fine, I'm down to try, guys. Twist my leg. So I guess the other question is, everyone in the crowd will eventually own these things, right? Why?
Yeah.
Like, why do they want to own AI? Why do they want to own these models? Why do they want to continue to train and to pay for this and upkeep and have a censorship-resistant record and model and file of what they're creating, right? Why does that matter?
I think it's quite a simple answer to that question, which is, given the choice, let's assume that two models exist. One is that the AIs are there and they're owned by someone else, and I have no control over them, and the work I put into them as a player or as a user ultimately benefits mostly the entity that owns them. Given the choice of two equal scenarios, one in which I own the thing and one that I don't, what do I choose? 9 out of 10 people choose ownership. And so, the idea that these things won't exist is silly. They will. And now we just have to make the choice of, do we want to own them or not?
Well, God, I'm so sorry. I go right to the philosophy. I apologize again, Tom.
No, go in. I'm ready.
But what is ownership in the world of crypto would be my first question, because right now, if you look at any of the NFT projects with Bored Apes on through, like, yes, you own that NFT. I, Brooks, don't own any Bored Apes. I can use any of them. Essentially, they are public, sort of, they're public goods, but privately owned. It's a really extraordinary thing crypto can do. And so the ability for us to do the same with AI, where ultimately ownership is less about ownership and more about control, which is what ownership really is about. So my ability to train and be one who sort of works with and does that, if that's my thing, and it is actually, but if that's not your thing, that's fine too. But the ability to use my AIs and that kind of thing actually very quickly can actually run dividends for people who actually do own them. So it's it's one of those things, like, again, it's about the ecosystem of the entire thing, the ability to use, the ability to control, and the ability to grow. That thing is happening. You get to pick where you sit on that gradient.
Yeah, even if you don't, as Brooke says, even if you don't want to own it, you probably might want to use it. And that's good for the people who do want to own it.
Exactly. It's all positive.
So Brooks, we'll go to you for this one, because we started out with Aaron, but for everyone else in the crowd, again, going back to them, a lot of people mistake the benefits of AI and NFTs in gaming because they come from a traditional world. They see mainstream media and they're like, oh, this is a joke. It's fake. We don't want this. And we're literally offering them all of the things that they want: the ability to transfer their ownership of items from game to game, the ability to profit from them without going to an open market, things like that. And it might be more important to monetize, the items around the game versus the game itself, and to break what you just, perfectly describe as the magic circle. What is your view on, like, the community involvement on the financial side here for AI and gaming? How does that interplay?
One of the great difficulties is doing it responsibly and doing it in a way that isn't predatory. Predatory delivers gains. Like, I'm never going to say it doesn't. There is absolutely good reason to be a bastard. Like, there's a reason people are bastards. It's the way it works. The long term, it makes it more difficult. It's easy to be very short-term thinking. The world of AI, the world of crypto, the world of gaming, all of these things are places that we absolutely can and have seen people be bastards. And the gaming population, we'll talk about the anger the gaming population has towards crypto. They'll feel that towards AI if it's touching crypto. Anyone who says otherwise isn't paying attention. But the other side, I'd say, is they have justification for being angry. It's not just about crypto that the anger is. And with AI people, it's not just about crypto or vice versa. It's the way that these tools and the way that their world has been hyper financialized and exploited, with them at the bottom of the pile. And it's a thing that every time it gets a little bit worse, when there's a leap, when it gets a lot worse, the anger boils, and it will. I think for us, the question is ultimately going to come down to how we can really change things to be a little bit more revolutionary, be a little bit more open. And as I sort of just outlined, the way that we can enable ownership, but not totality of that. The ability for me to buy a Van Gogh, I then control what happens to that Van Gogh. Is it going to be shown in a museum? If I buy or commission a piece of art, I show it in my house to people I like. No one in the world gets to see this beautiful piece of art. I get to choose which museum it goes in and how much tax break I get. And I get to go through all these things, when the reality is the 7-year-old who it could inspire to become a great artist and lead them down that pathway never gets to see it. A world instead where AI, gaming, art, these hyper creative things, science, archaeology, all these things that are generally seen as non-profitable entities because ultimately they need to be publicly owned. They need to be public. Well, we have that. These things can be public. They can be public goods, yet also privately owned. It's a weird thing crypto does. And it's a very difficult thing to wrap your head completely around. But we've had this discussion, and it's over time, it's going to get better. And specifically with AI and the way that Altered State Machine as a thing is doing it, it's one of the reasons I like you guys. And one of the reasons I'm sort of jazzed at some point to see where you go is, as we turn that on its head and people are able to have their control for those who want it, other people can use it and utilize it as they go about their day. They can use the system Netflix is secretly hiding for recommendations, because that's how privacy works. Instead, make it public, make it on the token, and then suddenly we've got everyone using it. It's being refined, but it's a public good. I don't have to pay to use this thing. Very strange way of thinking through these things. As this revolution really starts taking over, I think we start getting into a place where the anger diminishes and people can start to see, oh, actually, there's actual possibility here. There's still going to be bastards, but it's a really interesting turn that we're able to start making.
Yeah, and I think like Brooks is right. You have, if you want to make an impact, you have to think long term. And, the goal of ASM isn't to make, like lots of money building games, although that might be an outcome. It's to give the public the ability to own and control, or the communities to own and control artificial intelligence. That's the goal. There's a means to an end there, and that requires financial incentives, because otherwise people don't get off their ass and do things. But at the same time, that's not the end. That's a means. So, and I think also like this whole kind of anti-crypto culture from the gaming community, it's a really interesting thing, because a lot of the arguments that are put up are kind of quite weak. And I feel like as an example, NFTs are bad for the environment. Cool, dude. There are many, many more PlayStations than there are Ethereum nodes. PlayStations are Ethereum nodes. Like, they have 8 GPUs in them, and they're like crunching the same kinds of calculations as an Ethereum node does. And so the notion that gaming's green and crypto isn't is just a stupid thing. I feel like almost if we had invented blockchain or decentralized ledger technology and used it first to give gamers ownership of their in-game assets, and that was the first use case, everyone would love it, because people naturally kind of want to be able to do that. And so, but the fact that as Brooke mentioned, that it started as a financial game, and then has become a tool that can be used for these other things, has put it in a context of, of a world that those people hate. And so because it touches that world, that hate translates to it. But if you stripped away everything else, and the only thing that existed was the ability for people to own their in-game assets and trade them freely, I think that would have been a smash hit.
And we've talked about this. I disagree strongly on the in-game assets thing. I agree the general thing of what you're saying. I agree with the in-game assets. These other use cases, we've seen how they already are kind of fairly abusive when they've turned gamers into basically labor forces rather than people playing. The push for me is
that's a layer on top, Brooks. I think that there's this distinction between building up a story, a history, a lore, a relationship with a character that ultimately someone else owns, and then me being able to be the owner of that ultimately, and the layer you're talking about, which is this kind of false economy that exists on top of it. Yeah,
we take the best part about the digital world, which is infinite and lack of scarcity, and we basically introduce the shittiest part of our real world on top of it. But this is my point: is that layer you're talking about? Because I agree with you here, and I agree with you here. That is incredibly difficult to parse, except for people who this is our literal job, is to think about this and care about this. And so this is one of the battles we have, and it's going to be a continuing thing. And again, how you do it is you do it by showing. One of the things early crypto has had a problem with, and I think for a long time, is that it's always been show not tell. I promise that we're going to be getting there at Ethereum 2.0 for quite a while now. Like a lot of promises that are coming that just don't hit, versus actually building the damn thing, actually having the AI, Altered State as an example, actually having the game developed, like Our World in Nor, actually having these things and going, look, you can literally see how it works. The code is out there. It's public. I'm not hiding things. This isn't like some weird shit. Sources out. You tell me, am I full of shit? And then they can go, oh, and then you can have a real conversation. And I think that's where we're going to really have a fun time.
So where do you guys think this happens though, right? Like when Bitcoin came around, like the whole generation of TradFi bankers were like, screw this, we're not going to do it. And they didn't uptake it until, 10, 11 years later, or maybe more than that at this point. Is this a generational shift that will happen with current gamers? Or do you guys think we're going to have to wait several years until the younger generations are just born into it and understand it?
I think to a certain extent, like humans hate change. Anything that comes along that's new is the devil to start off with. Radio was the devil, TV was the devil, electricity was the devil, steam engines were the devil. At some point, probably fire was the devil. So I think that there's just natural resistance to change from people who are have been in an established mode for some time, and you can't escape that with anything except time and education. But mostly time.
I agree wholly. I would say that ultimately the challenge comes down to is I don't think it's waiting till the next generation. I think it's about making sure that the onboarding matches whatever's current. So in online games, as an example, were not a thing in the 90s. They started to be. It was a pain in the ass. If anyone ever had a LAN party or modem dialed up their friend to play Command and Conquer, or Duke Nukem, or Doom, like I did, that it was, we'll say, cumbersome as a cute way to put it. And a lot of people were like, obviously this is going to be the future, but it didn't take off until technology got to point A, until the ease of it wasn't setting up some weird subnet or bullshit, but just literally connecting to Xbox Live. When you get to this point where it's tapping a button and everything else is magic, users will do whatever comes naturally. We just have to be able to find that way to do the thing.
Totally makes a lot of sense. So what do you guys view as the next stage for everyone?
And sorry, just like one last point is it's our job as creators to make funner, better, more interesting, more socially connected games than these people have ever played before. That's actually what it starts with. I think this whole kind of notion of play to earn is just a hiding to nowhere, because games are about escaping reality. They're about putting aside your daily grind, and although you can get into a grind in some cases, but putting that aside and going and living in another world, and it being someone you couldn't be normally. And if it becomes a job, then and the design of the thing is to be is to drive a workforce, then that not only is a false economy, but it's a terrible game. And so
100%.
And so the start has to be build better fucking games than they've ever seen before, and then they'll want to play them, irrespective of what sits behind it.
No, it's exactly just to build off that. There's an old saying, and people don't know what it means, is the customer is always right. People think that means that it's literally that the customer is always right when they talk or they yell at you, or no, people suck. When that phrase came about, because if you have a hardware store and everyone walks in and goes, hey, do you sell towels? And you say no, and they go, oh, and they walk away. If that happens every day, oh, by the way, just so the customer's right, you should have towels. This is the reality of how these things work. For us, when people and gamers and players say, fuck, I don't want X, I refuse to have that, understand why, utilize that, and run with that, because what the customer wants is what they want. You're never going to change someone's mind. You're just not going to do it.
But how do we, like Aaron opened with, we have to make better games. How are you guys doing that when Activision has 10,000 employees?
That's an easy one. That's easy. It's actually super easy. It's amazing. Activision has 10,000 employees because the games they build necessitate it. And those 10,000 employees aren't designers making brilliant move systems or gun systems. They're people building 9,000 different types of skins for one specific gun and doing that over and over. There's a joke that there's multiple people in the world of Rockstar. Their only job is the texture on tires, because that's what someone goes to art school for, apparently. Like, they put out so much content, that's the reality. Instead, what you can do, and what you're able to start seeing, because by the way, Activision Blizzard's having trouble finding talent, Ubisoft's having trouble finding talent, because the people who've been in this, people who've been doing this, see those games and they're like, yeah, I don't want that. They care about the art that they're making. And this is not just saying like creatives or artists. Engineers are artists in their own right as well. Everyone is. They care about the stuff. I'm literally going through the process right now where I'm finding people who give a shit and saying, here's what I'm doing. We're looking at really changing the face of games. Small team, do something interesting and just prove it. And we're getting really amazing talent. But I literally had an interview yesterday that we were able to find someone who I was shocked was as excited and down, because when we're talking about these concepts, the idea of what play means, how we can make all games free for people, how we can reside what it means to financialize them, and we can properly build out a financialized system around games that matters and that doesn't completely fuck over everyone involved. The people who are good at making games want to do that. They don't want to make Call of Duty 92 unless it's an interesting game. Like, that's the fun part. If it's interesting, they'll be there. If Activision is doing something, they're not. If Activision is doing something interesting, they're not. Then they'll be there. But we get to go after them. Otherwise.
Also, they're not.
Also, they're not.
But and just to build on that, because I agree with all of it. You know, the most innovative things to hit us from a technology perspective always started with small teams, and the bigger an organization gets, the less innovation they get. It gets to be incrementalism. I mean, we see that right across the board. You know, there are very few established companies that do something truly new.
No, our game dev team is 7 people. Like it's me and a few other people and one art guy and a couple engineers, and we're just doing it. We have other dev teams that are also small groups, but you don't need the 10,000. There's the old Once Upon a Time, Star Wars Connect came out with the wonderful Connect dancing of Han Solo and Darth Vader and the Emperor even. Worth checking on YouTube. No one believes it when they see it. That was like 2,500 people worked on that. Like, size doesn't mean good game. Budget doesn't mean good game. It's horrifying game. These things are awful, but it's because of their size quite often. There are brilliant giant games as well, but the creative, interesting people want to do interesting things, and small teams, thanks to tools, thanks to technology, thanks to everything that's become hyper democratized. It's insane what you can do now on a home rig and build.
And also, altered state machines specifically makes it possible to build more engaging games that have better meta games inside of them with fewer people, because you're giving these agents parameters, and then they are figuring out how the game works. You're not having to program all of that stuff in. You give them objectives and constraints and rewards, and then they go and figure out how to play the game and how the gameplay works. And so the manpower required to build, and the time required to build, and the money required to build an ASM game of the same kind of game that might exist today is going to be much less.
What's the difference here on the gamers' involvement on building out these games from past games to blockchain-based games? Like, if I'm a dedicated user, I want to build a world, I want to build a skin, I want to augment an AI to do a certain task in a game, whatever it is. What's the difference between those user builders today in what you guys are building and those user builders in the past?
Oh, the user builders today, just look at Roblox and how absolutely easy it is for them to take basically child labor and make an exceptional amount of money off of it. Little kids who, I mean, it's horrifyingly exploitive and disgusting. But the idea of what Roblox has done is they have tools that kids can use to build games that other kids like to play. Like, good Christ, it's an incredible thing that exists. Minecraft as an entire,
and those kids pay to do it.
And they pay to do it. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So these tools and these things are more powerful than they've ever been. And once you're able to get past Roblox level and you're starting to get into things like Unity or Unreal and this other side of gaming, or even Godot, which has leaps and bounds as an open source engine, just been extraordinary to sort of see as it happens. It's so next level and so easy. My joke now is for people who want to get in games, cool, spend 2 months and do it. Like, just grab YouTube and just go.
Yeah. And honestly, that's how Altered State Machine came about. David literally did that. He went on to YouTube and figured out how it all worked. And
that's how Nor came about. That's how I learned crypto. Like, it's anything can be learned this way now. It's amazing.
And the other interesting thing in your kind of 10,000 Activision employees scenario is you can introduce the notion of creator marketplaces into these things as well. You go back to Atom, the Atom Car Club game, there will be a marketplace where people can create elements for the cars and put those in that others can go in and start to attach to their, you can create the tools and the systems to allow people to engage in the creative process and make that a community activity. And so now your 10,000, there might be a guy that absolutely loves textures on tires and he makes the best fucking tires in the world and that's what he wants to do every day.
Texture.
Yeah, but
they
that
exist.
That could be a thing, and those people could do that, and they can be part of the game ecosystem without being an employee of the company.
I love that. It makes, you guys totally tore apart my Activision comment, and I'm glad because it makes sense. But next time I'll bring like, you know, a helmet or something to make sure I'm okay afterwards. But the other thing I wanted to get into on the flip side of this is that there is a lot of data in these games, right? Applying real world data, applying external data. How the hell are we linking external data and in the game data? I know everyone says it's so easy, like, oh, it's an API, but it's a lot harder than that. How are we doing that?
I mean, it's not much harder than that.
It is that easy. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
also, it's not
to
even
build
necessary.
it, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
To build it is
Yeah,
a pain in the ass. I'm not going to say to build it, but like, again, Roblox uploading models, like as a thing, VR chat, which in theory, I might be being seen in. The way that they work at uploading, like the ability to just ingest is actually something that's growing and growing and growing in a lot of the software, and it's getting easier in time. One of the big breakthroughs, and it's this, people see the beautiful Unreal 5 demos, what they don't get is the idea that I can actually just have a model and it goes into Unreal blows my mind, because once upon a time you used to have to send it to like outsourcing shops in China to have 90 versions made for level of detail and for distance culling and all these nightmarish problems. We don't have to care anymore. The more we get to these amazing leaps where now we don't have to give a shit, we can kind of do stuff, it's kind of wonderful.
No, I totally agree. And the question I had that I lost my train of thought on before was that in crypto, in DeFi, in these communities, everybody wants ownership, they want control, they want to say. The reality is not many people want to do the work, they don't want to say, and they just want to enjoy what's out there. It might be upside, it might be inclusion, whatever it is. In the way you guys are describing the future of gaming, are you guys confident, or do you expect all of your users to take an active role in defining the protocol parameters, the game mechanics, all the hard stuff that frankly might not be too much fun?
No. I fully expect most people not to. And even if most people wanted to, it'd be a shambles. I think, you know,
user-generated content is one of the worst things in the world. If you haven't done it, it just flat out is. I used to, once upon a time when social media was first starting, I used to run UGC contests for Star Wars, and we'd get people sending in images and pictures and drawings, and generally speaking, it was always a hot mess with one or two that are like decent and one that's like an actual artist, and you look them up and it's a professional, and it feels bad that this is, it's just a really weird mix, because it turns out most people aren't good at everything. I know, it's a shock. So like, it's the big idea, and it's one of the things.
Kevin exists.
Good people exist. But it's the ability for us to sort of have fewer people and not have it be a thing where literally power begets power, which is, I think, that's the challenge with the current system, even we have in the real world, where power begets its own power. Those who are powerful become more powerful. We don't want that, but we also don't want Steve down the street who just smokes pot and lives all day, and you know, he likes video games. That's great. I don't want him designing the future of democracy. Like, that's not the person. So having people involved at the right levels, I think there's some very good ways to do it. I'm a big believer in sortition. I've had this conversation with both of you, but I think there's really good ways to get around this that don't necessarily have power beget its own structure.
I think the most interesting thing for me about the notion of governance, which I think you're hinting at here, is if we look at, because this isn't a new thing, we've been trying to get this right for, you know, thousands of years, and we probably still haven't, but we definitely still haven't. But if you look at it, most people aren't interested in it until there's a point of crisis. So most people will go along with the status quo until a point of crisis, and then they'll change. The status quo requires people who are motivated by whatever to actually operate it, that are kind of deep in it, and they want to be doing that as their thing. The everyday person will just go with the status quo until a point of crisis. The interesting thing about the technology, say DAOs, for example, is not that that everyone can be part of the governance process on an active, persistent basis, because that's just a pipe dream. It's that when there is a moment of crisis, the users get to decide, which is a different paradigm to what exists now. If Facebook fucks up, which they regularly do, we don't have any power to change it in that moment of crisis. And so the paradigm shift is not that every user gets involved in governance on a permanent basis. It's that every user has the opportunity to affect change in a moment of crisis.
Yeah,
but you still need a core team of people who specialize.
I love that. But
yeah,
isn't that so? But I agree with you, Aaron. Like, people only come around a crisis. You see this with any business, but isn't that like the worst scenario? Like, you have this fantastic game
I know,
running,
but humans are fucking lazy.
Yeah, that's true. Is there any way that you guys can motivate people pre-crisis?
Again, but this is why I aim at sortition as a concept. I think if you get to the point where you have, let's say, a people's parliament of 400 people, Ireland's, there's a few places that have this. And by the way, the Greeks, who kind of invented democracy, this is what they had. You have random people who are just paid to be in the spot. You motivate them instantly to be in it, and you take care of them. You give them experts. You give them all the things they need in order to learn. And it's this really weird thing. It's the reason jury trials, and it's most of the world does a random selection for jury. That's the reason, is because we know actually chance is the best option to have flatness in power. And so that's why I'm a big believer in, and I think there's a lot of power in governance to do the same with that as well.
Jeez, no, that's exciting. So how do you guys?
I, for one, am just waiting for our quantum AI overlord to make all the decisions for us.
I hope I could buy a piece of that NFT. Really, hopefully get some good control there. What do you guys? How do you guys think this plays out? What is the hierarchy of control of a game? And also, second question, when do you guys get fired by your community?
I mean, I feel like the answer to the second one is that we get to, with everything in these decentralized systems, you get to the point where you're there because you want to be there, not because you're needed. And so being fired is probably not the right notion, but it's having the opportunity to not be the person who's responsible for everything, I think, is a good outcome in decentralized systems. Also, like, you know, if you think about it as a protocol thesis, like, our job is to give the tools to make the protocol successful irrespective of our own activities, but that doesn't mean that we won't still want to build cool shit. And so, you know, the notion of kind of being fired doesn't really fit into that, because you can keep building on it independently, just like anyone else can. But being irrelevant is probably a better position to be in. And then,
go ahead, Aaron.
No, as I say, on the other question, I don't know if anyone has the answer to it yet. No one's done it successfully.
That's also true. I have maybe a more romantic notion. So my son's 4, my daughter was just born just a couple of weeks ago. I look at children not drastically different than this. With a child, you're building a system. That's all any of us really are. We are systems. We like to think we're a lot more than that, but we are a series of pieces our parents put into place and society did, that we react to the world the way we do as we go. At some point, my son is going to stop wanting to hold my hand when we go out. At some point, he's going to stop asking dad for different things and help in different places. And at that point, if he does, I've actually done my job as a parent. And I think with the community, it's not so much being fired, it's knowing you're not needed anymore and being able to go, excellent.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you guys. Do you guys think that, So I guess the cultural shift is it's very hard for a traditional game dev to come in here and think that they might become irrelevant, right? Like
but they're not becoming irrelevant, because if they're doing their job, they're building cool shit, people will want to use it. You only become irrelevant when you stop thinking about what's best for the community.
are they okay with that though, Aaron? Like a
real
traditional
quick
game
though,
dev-
because I do want to step back, because there is I'm to us, and maybe I want to have this is a worthwhile discussion. To me, game developers are not at the whim of the community. The ownership of the community is what the developers allow. You can't, there's things you just would never change in some games, and some things you just simply wouldn't allow. If Halo decided to come over and make their version of this, they're not suddenly going to have naked, big breasted women as the main characters running around, even if the community really wants it, which they probably do, given gamers. That kind of stuff is you determine how much involvement your community has. They don't own you. They own what you allow them to own. The battle is, and the smart move is, finding that balance between you being able to make something great that you can be confident in with them playing inside of the sandbox, but make sure the sandbox is enough that they feel they have proper agency, control, and their own destiny in their own hands. If you can do that balance, any developer can make their way in.
But also, and the great thing about, decentralized protocols is, if they don't like those constraints, they can fork you. So that's the kind of that's the key ingredient there. You might be able to decide as a developer what constraints you put on your users and community in terms of their role in decision making, and then they can be, the customer is right, and just choose to go somewhere else.
Have we explored the link between the developers being the players and interacting with the community in the new age? Like, I don't know how game development works traditionally, but I'm assuming these guys are in an office somewhere, they interact with the community a little bit, maybe on message boards, whatever. But now they're interacting with the community who own this thing day to day. They're getting feedback. They can implement changes. Is that feedback loop between the developers and the players being a meaningful difference for new games?
The specific nature of it is what's shifted. People don't remember early Minecraft days, and it's not just Minecraft. A lot of games do this, where they literally list, here are the features, upvote or downvote what you think I should be working on. Here's the bug list, and tell me which one I should be doing or I shouldn't be doing. Developers utilize communities in traditional games massively. World of Warcraft would be a very good example of this, actually. They are not above the clouds as gods. They are very much embedded. Very often, most of the developers actually now even have come as people who grew up playing. My buddy Mike works over there in the IT at Blizzard. We literally spent literal days of our lives in that first year of World of Warcraft playing together.
/played is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a lot. But the specific sort of change is having again, the way tokens work and NFTs work is, it's not ownership in the traditional sense, but it is meaningful. I am a part of this. It is an emotion and a feeling, and with a reality and a contract with it that gives people something a little bit more. It feels like it's mine rather than just a thing I'm playing. And the more you have that, it shifts from being I'm hoping the developer listens to me, which is the case, and good developers do listen, to actually I'm telling the developer what I think ought to be done. And if everyone agrees with me, we're telling the developer, and that power is very unique.
That's a hell of an answer, guys. It's such a new world here. What do you think if somebody from the crowd, if we took the average of everyone in the crowd right now and they asked a question for you guys, what do you think that would be? Like, what do you think people are most confused about at the final, conclusion of our conversation on AI and gaming and NFTs? Like, what do you think would be, someone comes up to you afterward, they catch you like, hey, Aaron, hey, Brooks, doesn't make any sense. What do you guys think that would be?
It depends on the crowd. Like, I can't see any of them. Gamers, their question to me eternally is, why are you doing this? Why NFTs? We've had hires who are not going public that they're working for us because they are afraid of backlash, which is significant. And it's a thing, again, I get it. I get the frustration, and the internet's an awful place as it is. To me, when we talk about
we went
NFTs,
through that at Wall Street. You leave and your bosses hate you.
Yeah.
The moment you start in a place of, Well, all NFTs are bad. Folding Ideas did a wonderful channel. I actually think his video was excellent with an edge. And there's a frustration I have the entire time is he essentializes the entirety of crypto. And when the entirety of crypto is being called these things, it's the same as once upon a time when the internet was called this, or when it's this insane, it's 92,000 technologies layered on top of each other. So if you don't like the shape of that, that's great. It isn't a thing.
Video games cause gun violence. It's the same meme.
Break things up, put them together,
Yeah.
figure out how things work, and actually retry to put it together in new ways. And that's, I think, what we're doing. That's what I know Aaron's doing. And I think the big push is just going to continually be, look at what we're doing, talk to us about it, and actually think through it. Because you're very right. There's a shit ton of these awful NFT scams and crypto things. There's also a shit ton of people doing amazing work and really trying to push some new stuff. Because I will tell you right now, the old way of financializing games is worse. Because well, you may be angry at NFTs and people, sure, and you're selling things in games and blah, blah, blah. The way we financialize games over the last 40 years, you don't realize it, but it's just as bad. It is just as bad.
Brooks, I agree with you, but I frankly don't think most people will take the time to think, and it only clicks
They
when
will.
using it.
Well, yes.
Maybe,
Once that's what
like
I mean.
DeFi,
Is that's what I say
like
when they're
DeFi, yeah.
actually in it, when they're doing it, and that's why I keep saying
When they're
it's show
doing
not
it.
tell.
Yeah,
Agreed.
It's show not tell.
Yeah,
it's the same. It's exactly the same meme as what we've said before around the internet or any new technology that comes along. You're not going to convince people without them experiencing something better and different. Like, you can never explain something that they've never imagined before without giving them something to see what that juxtaposition looks like, what the difference looks like.
To use World of Warcraft as an example, World of Warcraft was a subscription fee game.
Yeah.
There were those before, those existed. The numbers didn't even come fucking close to what Warcraft did, because people before that were like, I'm not paying monthly for it. That's a video. How much does that cost me? That cost me $180 a year. Like that mentality.
Or play to win in mobile, or like the first free to play, kind of, everyone hated it. Like it'll never be successful. It'll never be a thing, and not everyone loves it, but it's a significant market in its own right. And I think we get to the same kind of position, is that, sure, you'll have your diehards that just won't, for whatever reason, mostly ignorance and lack of education, just won't change their minds, just like we have with, crypto today.
Well, and I'd even say the free-to-play thing. No, go ahead. Sorry.
But also equally, there will be people who take the time, or we will build really crazy cool shit that people will want to play, and then people's perceptions will change because of that. And that's our job, is to prove that, we can build better, funner, more sustainable, fairer games and economies inside of games, and just do it. And then the change will happen as a result of that.
Yeah. Free to play is actually a great example, because those of us who were involved in the early part of it, there was an exceptional amount of potential. We specifically, it once was, look, these games, anyone in the world can play these games. Holy shit. And we can make money. It wasn't, oh, great, we can do this and make more money, which is what it very much is now. So the idea of the inevitability of these things is real. They will continue marching. Technology marches, society marches, things push towards all of these things. The question is, are you going to sit on the sidelines and piss and bitch and moan until it gets something where people who don't care are the ones in charge, and they're the Zuckerbergs, they're the Kodaks, they're the assholes at the top who are just screwing everyone? Or are we actually going to jump in and go, hey, Aaron, I think what you're doing sucks. Here's how we can make it better. Yeah. And then Aaron will go, oh, Brooks, I think here's what you're doing sucks. This is, by the way, a conversation that has happened and will happen again. And we need more people doing that, because if you're just going to bitch and piss and moan on the sidelines, you're doing nothing for anybody.
Yeah. And I double down on that. It's exactly that. The people, by and large, who are going to make a difference in this space actually care about what they're doing. They care about gamers. They care about game developers. They care about game economics. If you think we're not doing it the right way, help us figure it out. And as opposed to saying, your effort in trying to make things better is wrong.
Yeah. Totalizing the
Guys.
entire thing as if it's a single voice is silly.
Yeah.
Guys, I couldn't agree more. And I'm frankly, side note, excited to have both of you guys on in the future to do some long form podcasts. You guys just vibe and jam, and I love it. And anyone in the crowd listening, you could follow Brooks on Twitter at his username is PlayIsFree. All easy to go. And Aaron is Aaron MCDNZ, if you're not already. So guys, you just crush your vision of where AI, gaming, and crypto could come into play, and why it's not this hostile thing, but it's a new era that we're hoping to get people involved in. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.